Hi there, I'm Nedka Babliku. I have here with me today Syed Ali Zia Jaffery, an analyst on war and geopolitics based in Pakistan. He writes for various premier newspapers and other outlets. Syed, welcome. Great to have you here. Thank you very much for joining me.
Thank you for inviting me here, ma'am. It's a pleasure being on your show.
It's a pleasure to have you here with me. Syed, let's talk about US Secretary of State Rex Tillerson's visit to Pakistan quite recently. He met with the Pakistani premier whilst there, and he achieved one thing, and that is insulting Pakistan. I mean, he went there and said that Pakistan does not do enough to fight terrorism, which is an insult not just to the host country, but more so to those poor Pakistanis who've lost their lives at the hands of terrorists, US-funded terrorists, in Pakistan, but also at the hands of the Indian Army in Jammu and Kashmir. So Rex Tillerson left empty-handed, sucking his thumb, all because Pakistan is no longer willing to pursue a foreign policy dependent on the United States. Now it's standing up to the United States, and the China-Pakistan economic corridor is testament to this new reality that we have here. So do you think that the China-Pakistan economic corridor has been the decisive factor in Pakistan's recent geopolitical and geostrategic shifts away from the US and towards its Asian partners?
It's a very good question, but before answering that, I would like to just spend a few minutes on how America has viewed us on the war on terror. Well, ma'am, we have sacrificed meritoriously in the war on terror. The only country which has lost so many people, be they civilians or army men, in the war on terror.
Mm-hmm.
And our army happens to be the only standing army in the world which has defeated terrorism militarily. The remnants of terrorism which are still remaining are due to a couple of factors.
Mm-hmm.
One being the situation in Afghanistan. After having dispossessed the enemy from the sources of strength, the enemy of Pakistan is using Afghan soil to mount attacks inside Pakistan.
Mm-hmm.
Now, Pakistan, having done its best to start sealing the borders, has faced resistance from Afghanistan. The more the US applies military power inside Afghanistan, the more Taliban are resisting them. And the more Taliban are resisting them, they are blaming everything on Pakistan. By they, I mean Afghanistan and the US.
Mm-hmm.
So the problem is their faulty military and political strategy in Afghanistan since 2001 has actually been repeated time and time again, and they don't seem to learn, or they are doing it deliberately. That's a wholly different debate.
Yes.
But the problem is they're passing the buck on Pakistan. Pakistan has been very clear about how it has tackled militancy and terrorism on its own soil.
Absolutely.
It has done more than any other country can do, will do, or has done in the past. No other country. We have lost 6,857 army personnel in this war on terror. Besides, we have incurred a loss of $70 billion to the economy. We have lost 70,000 civilians. Today, an attack took place in a church in Quetta, killing 9 people, martyring 9 people. This is absolutely horrendous. But the problem is, we Pakistanis are people like me, people like my brothers, my fellow citizens, my fellow countrymen. They are suffering,
Yes.
and we have to bear the brunt of a faulty US policy.
Yes.
In Afghanistan.
You certainly do.
And elsewhere.
Syed,
Now-
that's really
now-
interesting, and I will go back to the Afghanistan scenario, which is because that's very, very crucial. But go ahead.
Exactly.
Now. We'll go back to that.
Now
Yeah.
the China question, the OBOR and the CPEC question. The problem is that yes, Pakistan has always enjoyed a very tactical relationship with the US.
Mhm.
It's an interest-based relationship. We have used each other very well, and we have been having bad epochs of ties between with each other. But the problem is this time Pakistan, after the announcement of the South Asia policy, Pakistan has shown some guts that, hey, hold on, you've done a lot. When Tillerson came to Pakistan, he was met singularly by the army chief and the prime minister as part of a delegation. They did not give him private audiences. This was a very significant change. They told him, hello, you are a Secretary of State and we will not meet you personally. This is a deviation from the past. Now, what I call this as a courage on part of Pakistan, and there are reasons for it. Pakistan has backup plans. It has options, bank upon China, Russia. The problem is that the region has been afflicted by a new great game, and that is the Sino-US great game, which will now circumambulate around one thing: One Belt, One Road initiative. Fortunately or unfortunately, CPEC is the linchpin of that project, and CPEC gives China a very easy conduit to expand its tentacles of power in the region and beyond. It actually dispossesses the US of the ability to choke China via the Strait of Malacca, and that is a big setback to the US. So now the problem is for Pakistan that by virtue of being at the epicenter of CPEC, the US will not only take forward its bad ties with Pakistan, but it will also use CPEC as an excuse to foster its enmity and its geopolitical tiff with China. And it will do that by doing one thing. China and India are old competitors, somewhat enemies because I'm saying because they also embroil in trade activities. So now the US will try to prop up that rivalry to choke China.
Let's just break all this down a little bit. Sorry to interrupt you, dear, but we will go through all this in detail. Let's just go back to Pakistan's the Pakistan internal situation. It's clear to many that there will never be another Zia in Pakistan, and Zia. So what do you think has contributed to this? What is a permanent shift, it seems?
Permanent? Could you just rephrase the question? There won't be any other Ziaul Haq?
Yeah, absolutely. In Pakistan, many believe that there will never be another Zia in Pakistan. What do you think has contributed to this permanent pivot?
Yeah, the pivot is absolutely obvious. Pakistan's interests align with those of China. China, by virtue of its ever burgeoning power status, wants to expand itself beyond the region, and it finds the Gwadar port as a very, very cheap and an easy conduit to do that. So Pakistan hence finds itself right at the fulcrum of being China's launching pad. So Pakistan, I use the term Pakistan has borrowed courage from China, and it is here to stay. We are not in a tactical relationship with China. Pardon?
So as have many countries have borrowed courage from China. It's a good way of putting it.
Yeah, but I want to relate it importantly with how CPEC is important for OBOR. CPEC is one of the most important projects of OBOR, if not the most important. So because China was at the mercy of being blocked by USA through the Malacca. So that thing has only been obviated by the activation of the Gwadar port. So this is why in the entire OBOR, CPEC has the greatest value. And hence Pakistan, as of now, is a subservient partner in CPEC. But Pakistan has done one thing by default or by its own foreign policy positioning. It has actually increased Chinese stake in a peaceful and stable Pakistan more. And this is how international relations work. I wrote an article on CPEC way back in May 2016. I argued that I'm not concerned of how much of a slice Pakistan gets. Right now, the good thing for Pakistan is that it has to play second fiddle to a great economic and military power. And for a country like Pakistan, which is a reasonably sized power in the region, it is very important for us to play a second fiddle and play it effectively while improving our own economic and military base. You know, nations and states all
Pakistan will
throughout
soon be a leading
history.
power in the region, in any case, especially if India continues with its antics, with its anti-Pakistan actions and anti-China provocations. If India continues to do that, well, then China will just continue to do more business with Pakistan and less with India.
Well,
so Pakistan's
basically, Trump and Modi are playing into the hands of Pakistan and China. This is something which we all need to understand. As you rightly pointed out, that the more India tries to sabotage CPEC, Pakistan and China would come together. And the more and look at Donald Trump. What did he do? For any sane person, knowing Pakistan, he can never accept Pakistan not to react if he says that I would give India an increasing role in Afghanistan. He cannot expect Pakistan not to react, but because anybody who knows Pakistan and India, he understands that the very reason why Pakistan has some kind of an influence in Afghanistan is because it does not want to be sandwiched between India on the east and an Indian influenced Afghanistan on the west. It can never tolerate that, especially after the events of 1971. The very fact that Pakistan tried to do what it did in Afghanistan in 1979 was because Pakistan was apprehensive of India's influence inside Afghanistan after the 1971 war. Because already Afghanistan was creating trouble for Pakistan since the very beginning, since 1947.
And China doesn't want trouble in Afghanistan because it wants to, it wants it to be a safe and secure area for all.
Now, if I try to engulf you from both sides, you will react. Obviously, you'll do something to.
Well, they do it deliberately. That's the point. They want to provoke Pakistan because they're annoyed.
Exactly.
Now, speaking of India, now some Iranian diplomats have been reported as saying that the Chobahar port will never be used to help India to foment anti-Pakistan regional positionings maneuvers. Can you comment on this? Also, how do you feel about the attempts, the efforts that Tehran and Islamabad have made to improve their relations?
This calls for a detailed answer, so there are three facets to it. One, that it must be borne in mind that states do not entangle in zero-sum diplomacy. It's absolutely fine if Iran does business with India. We must not expect any state to do exactly what we want them to do.
No,
look, we must not be dissuaded if some state does business with another state. We must not be discouraged from establishing better ties. In fact, there is more reason for Pakistan to establish better ties with Iran, and both the countries are doing that. I'll come to one point in a bit, but let me tell you one thing. Chahbar and Gwadar are not rival ports. Gwadar's capacity is much more.
Well, that is not how India sees them.
Much more than Chahbar. So if anything, Iran wants to join CPEC, and there are talks that Iran wants to establish a railroad between Chahbar and Gwadar. So it is important for us to understand that India is banking wrongly on Iran. Iran adopts a very independent foreign policy as identified by Henry Kissinger in his book Diplomacy. The issue is that, okay, Iran can do business with India, fine, but there are two things that India needs to understand. One, that Iran does not share India's hate for China. If anything, Iran wants to establish better ties with China. The other thing, Iran, there are no friends and enemies in international relations, but there are two enemies in the world order right now. Iran and the US actually hate each other, and they don't want to establish any kind of relationship with each other. So now one thing, India is a strategic partner with US and Israel. Iran is at loggerheads with both those countries. Remember that. And this evolving situation in the Middle East, as you have seen what has happened, what Trump has done with Jerusalem. The problem is Iran is the only country that is challenging Israel since the very beginning. It's an undeniable fact, but one has to admit that. Now now I'm coming to your question about Tehran and Islamabad mending fences. Last month, the army chief went to Tehran for a very long and unprecedented visit. They agreed to, mend paper over differences and, establish a better relationship. And even our army chief met the chief of the IRGC. So that was very significant.
And of course, now there's a pipeline that Russia is going to build.
Exactly. Now Russia and Iran are obviously quite close, and Pakistan and Russia are in the process of establishing a very good tactical relationship at the military level for now. And even Russia wants to join CPEC at a later stage. Now the problem is the US-Iranian rivalry comes here, and it's very important to understand one important factor. Iran has afflicted and inflicted upon the US and its allies defeats after defeats in the Middle East.
Oh yes.
Syria, Iraq, and now Lebanon. Lebanon is a tough nut to crack for Saudi Arabia and the US. Hezbollah is very strong. I'm not taking any sides, but it's a fact. Hezbollah is way too strong for any opponent to defeat, and they know it. That is why Lebanon had that tenuous power settlement where the prime minister would be one and the president would be one, and the Sunnis were mollified with the fact that okay, the Hezbollah are a greater force to reckon with. So now, as one of my friends and colleagues, Andrew Koripko, wrote that now the US has to do something about Iran. They are blabbering and babbling that we'll do this, we'll do that. They've just decertified the JCPOA, but they don't have other tactical tools to hurt Iran. So the problem is this region, the Pakistan, Iran, and the Arabian Sea region. The US could use this as a means to hurt Iran. How? They could mount trouble in the border regions of Pakistan, which would automatically and obviously create tension between Iran and Pakistan. Last month, I read a news somewhere that the US has warned Pakistan of establishing warmer ties with Iran. So, what my point is that the situation in the Middle East will have an impact on this belt, as this belt would be heated up because CPEC has to be countered, while Iran has to be kept in check, and the US is not finding any other conduit to check Iran other than this region, and this region provides them with a relatively easier way to, hurt Iran somewhere along the line.
Yes, and I expect America will do its very best to dissuade India from having any kind of involvement, any significant involvement in Iran, in Chabahar port. I don't know how they're going to do that, but I think
Well,
they're
this is
very
another
unhappy with
important.
that.
This is another important thing. Trump is a madman. Let's be very frank about it.
Well, I just think he's a moron.
Trump does not understand the nuances of world politics. He's crude. Now, as of now, he hasn't actually spoken about Chabahar. But the US finds itself in a catch-22. They don't want to, estrange India.
Absolutely.
And they don't want any kind of facilities for Iran. So I think it is easier for the US to hurt China by propping up India as a power against it. But I am still at pains to, understand how India would be, held back from establishing better relations with Iran. But the problem, Pakistan has to be very careful. Pakistan must not allow these tactical differences or even below tactical level differences to, mar relations between Iran and itself. The problem is that that over the course of the last year, efforts have been made by Pakistan to, paper over differences with Iran. But Iran has shown recalcitrance. We need to tell Iran 2-3 things. That we as a country cannot tolerate any Indian influence. Business is okay, but we cannot tolerate any kind of allowance on part of Iran to India.
But the problem is the business side of things that the US doesn't want either. And that's what worries me.
But the problem is that we have to see how things go. And here Trump is a businessman, and Indians are very good businessmen as well, right?
Yeah, but they're also ideological. So far, certainly, so long as Modi is around. I mean, the problem with America and India is that they confuse ideology with pragmatism.
Exactly.
They can't just be pragmatic and do business and trade. They have to have the ideology involved too.
This is why some Indian analysts are wary of reposing too much optimism in ties with the US. One analyst confided to me that we are concerned that how would the US allow India to do trade with Iran, something which you're alluding to. But we haven't heard any official statement as yet. So I would be rather cautious in giving remark about this, but this is a very interesting question that needs to be answered. But we have to see how things pan out. But as I said, America is in a catch-22 situation.
Yes, absolutely.
And India is reposing too much hopes from Iran, I think, because Iran adopts a very independent foreign policy, and everybody knows that.
I think India is expecting too much from America. I think as well. The thing also, India needs to. India's having its cake and eating it too, because it's going to have to decide at some point, where its loyalties lie. I mean, do they lie with its Asian partners, or do they lie with America and Israel? So, but for now, it seems that the war on Pakistan, the war on China, the war on all these, the multipolar world is being fought in Afghanistan. It's all happening there.
That is another.
So let's talk about Afghanistan, Syed. Now, Pakistan, China, and Russia all agree that since Taliban form the part of the Pashtun majority, that they ought to join the dialogue table, and they should somehow be involved in the peace process of the US authored conflict, if you like. Who do you think Pakistan can realistically and maybe even should work with to implement a sort of a ceasefire, peace process settlement?
Well, 2 months back, 2 months back, our Foreign Minister Khwaja Asif gave an interview to Voice of America. He said that we are losing out the battle of influence over the Taliban to Russia. Russia has more influence over the Taliban than we have. This is what Khwaja Asif said. And on a serious note, one has to admit that even when the Taliban was in power, they were fiercely independent. The Pashtun mind is an independent mind. It doesn't listen to anyone. We dissuaded them. We actually pleaded them not to demolish the Bamiyans. They did that. It's our government. You don't have to intervene. So if somebody is trying to say that Pakistan dictated the Taliban in the 90s or the 2000s or even today, it's a fallacious thing to say.
It is. No.
The problem is, yes, we had that QCJ, but the QCJ is something like a defunct body, which, just because of one event or one drone strike, it fades away and then meets for teas and biscuits, and that's it. And it has no Taliban representation. The problem is, Taliban has one demand: foreign troops must go out of Afghanistan. The problem is
American troops.
No matter how much Pakistan, China, Iran, Russia, tries to influence the Taliban, will America fulfill that one demand which the Taliban? It won't.
You don't think?
And they won't. No matter how many casualties they suffer, every other week, General Nicholson says that 80% of the land would be cleared of Taliban after 2 years. We'll do airstrikes in Pakistan. We'll do this. We will militarily defeat
conflict.
them.
They want to steal the minerals. They want to, do their drug thing. They just want to keep the conflict going. But the conflict cannot keep going because of Obor. And, nothing will happen so long as there's conflict there.
They have to keep the pot boiling. That's the right term. They have to keep the pot boiling. They even have to turn a blind eye to what ISISK is doing. This suits them. Otherwise, it would have been pretty simple. Russia has offered so many times that, okay, let's use the Taliban against the ISIS, but the Americans have refused to enter into the Moscow dialogues. They've refused thrice. So the problem is, no matter what Pakistan does, it is important to understand that the US is in no mood to give up its obsession with the application of hard military power in Afghanistan.
But so what's your prognosis? The problem, your medium-term prognosis.
My prognosis, when I try to write on Afghanistan, frankly, I don't find anything new to write because the prognosis is pretty simple. The Americans will not relent their pursuit of military options, as it is pretty evident. The Taliban would not budge an inch. Agreed? Then what other analysis can you give?
Yes.
Now, why the Americans are doing this? There are 2-3 reasons for it. Russia has started to, reappear as a world power. It has started to, expand itself by those two documents, the security document and the foreign policy document that it prepared about 2-3 years ago. So the Americans, I feel, want to stay here with a significant military footprint so as to forestall the arrival of China and Russia in the Afghan theater. So I don't find any thaw or any kind of a let-off in the Afghan imbroglio. I think, if anything, this problem will compound. It will become more complex. The Taliban will become more brazen, and that's about it. And the effect would be on poor Pakistanis like me. This is the saddening part, because no matter what, any attack inside Afghanistan is attributed to Pakistan. I don't know how.
Yes.
I don't find it logical. I don't find it prudent that when the Afghans are controlling about 48% of when the Taliban are controlling 48% of Afghan territory, why do they need a piece of land in North Waziristan to hurt the American troops when they have so much territory available to them in Afghanistan?
Yeah.
When the opium trade is flourishing, when they have all the elements of support with them, why do they need a strip of North Waziristan to hurt American troops? The Americans haven't. I wrote an article earlier this year, and I wrote the US in Afghanistan, a tale of follies and miscalculations. Right from Operation Enduring Freedom, the US has adopted a very narrow concept of war fighting. The way they fought the war is not how insurgents are dealt with. They use massive firepower to obliterate the enemy. Well, insurgents thrive on changing locations. It's not a conventional army where you just destroy a bunker, you destroy a headquarter, and they would be helter-skelter. They thrive on changing location, changing appearances, mixing up with the local population, which is not different from what they are. So America never understood how to fight them, even at the tactical level, let alone at the strategic level. People say that America did not use the military victory as a means to start a political process, but I contend that America did not even win militarily, because those were tactical reverses
for them. It's a huge defeat for Afghanistan.
It's a huge defeat. Huge. It's a stalemate worse than Vietnam.
Syed, let's talk about Balochistan. How do you think? How can Iran and Pakistan cooperate to fight this terrorist threat there, in your opinion?
Oh, I was in Balochistan recently for a seminar which was attended by the army chief as well. So there in Balochistan there are 2-3 things that are happening, and I want to point that out because I was involved with them.
Go ahead.
I'm involved in a counter narrative project. So I take this opportunity to tell the audience what I feel is wrong and what I feel is right. Balochistan, the armed insurgency in Balochistan is not very lethal. There is a lot of infighting among the Baloch rebel groups. The leaders are spending a lavish life outside, and they're begging bowls to India for asylum. So when the leader is not around, the insurgency has no spine to it. Every day, hundreds of people are surrendering to the state, and they are being reinducted in the mainstream society by a very good rehabilitation program. We have, by we I mean the army, and the government of Balochistan have instituted a web of educational institutes in places like Sui, in other remote areas of Balochistan. The last sword of honor in our Pakistan Military Academy was a graduate of Military Cadet College, Sui. So that's a big achievement. As much as 600 officers of Baloch origin are currently serving in the Pakistan Army. Now, you might have heard this for the first time because nobody is there to tell you this. The media is infested with bad stories about Balochistan, about terrorism, about war, about famine. The other thing is that as of now, I'm quoting the army chief. He said that 232 cadets are getting training in the Pakistan Military Academy, and they would soon become officers, and they are ethnic Baloch people. It's a big thing. Balochistan is. I was talking to one Baloch, and he said that, sir, let me tell you one thing. We Baloch do not take up arms against the state. Those who do it, they're infested, they're funded, and they're
Well,
supported.
it's India, and then it's America on the Iranian side. Although I can't see how
Exactly.
they can, how it can't be easy to transport arms to the American side, to the
Exactly.
Iranian side,
Exactly.
can it?
Now,
So,
here it is important to understand how we need to, tolerate a few things. Every state has issues with another state. We have issues with Iran and we need to talk to them. And there are some serious issues. We have to talk to them there are concerns that they are, bolstering people in Parachinar to, go and fight in Syria. They were. Now things are different. But we need to talk to them that confrontation between us at any level is very counterproductive to peace in the region. And that, yes, and there are certain issues that Iran has with Pakistan, like Jindullah and all that, and we have to solve them. And if we solve them, if we have a good border mechanism, let me tell you, things are improving. Things are improving because of Pakistan's assiduous diplomacy. Pakistan did not take sides in the Saudi and Saudi Iranian tiff and the Qatar crisis as well.
He refused to take part in
Exactly.
Yemen. That's a really good point.
And let me tell you, we have that one very competent journal sitting at the IMCTC, General Rahil, a hero to many in Pakistan, including perhaps me. So I think his presence there as a commander would do a lot of good. Had the commander been an Arabic, I think things would have been very different.
Yeah.
So I think, but Iran was pretty happy that okay, if General Rahil is commanding that force, we'll accept him as a credible person. So this was a big feather in a cap for Pakistan, and I think with him being there, I'm pretty confident that he'll not allow certain things to happen. But again, Iran and Saudi Arabia are embroiled in many conflicts, in many crises and conflicts. Yemen, Lebanon, Syria and Iraq are now almost done and dusted because Saudis have been dealt with a severe blow in both the theaters. So the problem is that yes, Pakistan, and the other thing, the hybrid war, which includes disinformation in it at a greater degree. Now we have to be careful about the disinformation campaign that is being run. I tell you, the Chahbar port and India's ties with Iran will be played up inside Pakistan so as to dissuade the policymakers from establishing normal relations with Iran. Because India fires up everyone. If you tell this to a common Pakistani that Iran is pell-mell with the Indians, nobody would accept us shaking hands with Iran. So our SAIC policy makers have to counter this disinformation propaganda. And the other thing, I was talking to a senior ambassador the other day, and I said that we have a Saudi lobby and we have an Iranian lobby. We must have a Pakistani lobby as well now. I don't care about Iran. We must not care about Iran and Saudi Arabia, but we must care about them as well. So we must not and we must. Because both are very close to our heart. We cannot alienate one at the cost of another. And we cannot, please one at the cost of another. So it's important for us to have this balance. It is very difficult, but we have to do it. But Iran and Pakistan's close military coordination on the border is very important. It can help if we have good intelligence sharing mechanism devised in the near future, we can help counter the menace, because they have the Sistan Balochistan province, we have Balochistan, so things can heat up pretty soon. But let's see. It all depends on how Pakistan and Iran take their ties forward.
And also on what India is going to do next. I mean, you just don't know with Modi. I mean, now both finally, because we're running out of time, but India and Pakistan now are both members of the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, which is primarily a security organization, I believe. Do you see a possible future détente between these two countries, or are the challenges too great?
No, not at all. No détente between India and Pakistan, because now the natural rivalry between India and Pakistan has been given another air, and now it is part of that great game in the region, the Sino-US great game. So I don't see India having any incentive to come down from that high horse to talk to Pakistan, and Pakistan, I believe, has no reason to trust India.
Well, I think Pakistan, the way I see it, I feel that Pakistan is resentful of India, deeply resentful, and rightly so.
Of course, because
the way I see
16 December 1971, half of our country was lost because of massive Indian involvement. They came in, they supported the Bengalis, they broke our country, and now they thumb their chest on that. They celebrate that victory openly at Vijay Diwas.
Adding insult to injury.
Yeah. So how if I take something very precious from you, you'll never forget it for the rest of your life, and even your generations, your children, your grandchildren would be taught that this guy took something from me which was very dear to me.
And so
he's your enemy. He's your enemy till eternity. So this is plain and simple human nature.
Certainly not in the near future.
Not at all. No.
Okay, my dear. Well,
no détente.
It's been such a pleasure speaking with you, and so interesting. Thank you so much, Syed.
Thank you. God bless
you. God bless you too. Bye bye.